It all started with a coincidence, one that changed Emily Carter's quiet country life forever. That day, she had walked down to the river near the edge of her family's farmland to sunbathe. The blanket beneath her was old and faded, but the sun warmed her skin as she lay quietly, eyes closed. Then came the sharp screech of tires on gravel. Emily opened her eyes, turning just in time to see the door of a sleek, dark sedan swing open. A tall, confident man stepped out. Blonde, blue-eyed, and clearly not from around here. His dress shirt was still crisp despite the summer heat. "Excuse me," he said, approaching with a polite smile. "Do you know where I can find Elizabeth Simmons?" "She's out in the pasture," Emily replied, sitting up and brushing her long chestnut hair over one shoulder. "Went to milk one of the cows. The town hall's closed for lunch." "I see," the man said slowly, glancing around at the open fields. "Do people really live like this out here? No theaters, no fine dining, just endless countryside. It's like stepping into the dark ages." Emily tilted her head, amused. "Is that so bad? Some of us like the quiet." The man squinted at her as the sun lit her toned figure. Her long legs stretched out on the blanket, her waist narrow and her chest rising gently with each breath. He smirked. "You could win a beauty pageant back in the city." Emily's smile faded. "And who would be waiting for me there? I don't have money, no family. My dad left when I was 3. I've got my mum and this land." He introduced himself as Ryan Matthews, a marketing executive from Chicago. What started as a simple question turned into a conversation that lasted over an hour. He spoke with conviction about urban life, its opportunities, culture, pace. She listened, curious, sometimes skeptical. When he finally stood to leave, he asked for her address. He kissed her hand gently before departing, the engine of his car humming as he drove away down the dusty road. 3 days later, Ryan was back. This time, it wasn't just curiosity, it was intention. He visited Emily for the weekend. He brought flowers, wine, and a charm that captivated not only Emily, but also her mother, Diane. He sent telegrams, texts, and handwritten letters full of compliments and promises. The small community began to buzz with gossip. The city man was courting country girl Emily Carter. Girls whispered behind her back, jealous yet hopeful for a fairy tale of their own. At Emily's birthday, Ryan approached Diane with a bold announcement. "I'm taking Emily to the city tomorrow. We're going to get married soon." Diane raised her brows, stunned. "Just like that? You're taking her to your home without a wedding? That's not how we do things here. If it takes too long in Chicago, we've got a courthouse right in town." "Mama," Emily pleaded, eyes shimmering, "I've always dreamed of a city wedding." Ryan interjected, voice calm. "Don't you trust me, Diane?" She hesitated. "I do. I just hoped my daughter would become your wife before sharing your bed." "Mom, please," Emily hissed, flushing. "You're embarrassing me. That's old-fashioned." Diane sighed, her eyes softening. "I'm sorry, truly. She's my only child. I just want her safe. When I was young, I fell for a city man too. That's how Emily came to be." The next day, Ryan brought Emily to a modest one-bedroom apartment just outside the heart of the city. It was nothing luxurious, but to her it was a castle. He wrapped his arms around her waist, his eyes searching hers. "Finally," he whispered. Just the two of us. Just us. He kissed her deeply, his lips hungry with longing. His mouth moved down to her neck, leaving trails of warmth that made her shiver. Emily's breath hitched as she leaned into him, her heart thudding wildly. The room blurred, and all she could feel was his touch. I love you, she whispered, her voice trembling. I've never loved anyone like this. He answered her not with words, but with another kiss, this one slower, tender. She felt her whole body respond. Her nerves sang under his fingers, and her world tilted. He was patient, but passionate, leading her through a first experience she'd only ever dreamed of. When he finally held her completely, she clung to him, not with fear, but with wonder. The morning after, Ryan kissed her cheek and said he was heading on a business trip. Just 2 days, he promised. But then came another trip, and another. 2 months passed. Emily waited, hopeful. She often asked him shyly, when will we go to the courthouse? Soon, baby, he'd reply, brushing her hair back. Just a bit more work to sort out. One morning, as they sipped coffee together, she asked again, this time more directly, Ryan, I want to be your wife. Truly. He laughed. Not gently, not kindly. A cruel, hollow laugh that twisted something deep inside her. God, you really are naive, he said. You thought we were getting married? Her mug slipped from her hand and shattered. What? What are you saying? I'm married, Emily. I have a wife, a son. They're just out of town for now. She stared at him in silence, unable to form words, her breath caught in her throat. You told me you loved me, she whispered. He shrugged. You were cute. I helped you. Got you out of the mud, didn't I? Gave you a place to stay. Some new clothes. You should be thanking me. But I loved you. He stood, waving his hand toward the door. You're free to leave. Go ahead. But what do you think people back home will say? That little country girl ran off and got used by a married man. You'll be a joke. You want to go back to that? They'll laugh in your face. Her lips trembled. How could you do this to me? You're not the first, and you won't be the last. Emily stood frozen, her fingers trembling as she clutched the back of a dining chair. Ryan's words echoed in her head like gunshots. Married, a wife, a son. Lies. All lies. Her voice broke as she whispered, So this was all a joke to you? Ryan leaned against the doorframe, utterly unfazed. Don't be dramatic. You're not the first small-town girl to fall for a dream. I told you I had connections in the city. You want to stay here? Make something of yourself. I can introduce you to people. Real people. Her heart pounded. What kind of people? He smiled darkly. People who pay for beauty, affection. Not forever. Just enough to get by. Some of them are rich, powerful. You'd be surprised how much they're willing to give for a night of attention. Emily backed away, her breathing uneven. You mean prostitution? Ryan's eyes narrowed. Don't be so crude. I'm talking about arrangements, companionship. There's a difference. She shook her head violently. I'm not for sale. Sure you are, he said calmly. You just don't know your price yet. Emily darted to the door, ready to flee. But Ryan was faster. He grabbed her by the wrist, not harshly, but firmly. Think, Emily. You go back home now and you're ruined. Everyone knows you ran off with a man. No ring, no promise. Just scandal. You stay, you have a chance. She yanked her arm free and stumbled into the bedroom. The door slammed. Her sobs echoed off the walls. That night, she stood at the window of the apartment, staring down at the street below. The cold air from the open pane cut against her skin. A single step, she thought. One step, and the pain would stop. But something inside her resisted. A whisper, a flicker, not like this. Not now, not for him. The next morning, she didn't speak. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply dressed, brushed her hair, and left the apartment. She walked for hours with no destination. Her feet carried her through unfamiliar streets, past towering buildings and coffee shops, and strangers who didn't know her face or her shame. That evening, she returned, not to Ryan, but to the building. He was gone. A note lay on the counter. You're smart. You'll figure it out. There's a dinner tonight. Be ready at 8. Wear the black dress. Ah. She should have ripped the note, burned it. But instead, she dressed. When the doorbell rang, a different man entered. He was older, grey at the temples, sharply dressed in a tailored suit. His name was Richard Langford, a wealthy investor from New York with connections in several industries. Ryan had clearly planned this. Richard smiled politely. You must be Emily. Ryan told me you were stunning. He didn't do you justice. She didn't respond. He softened. Look, I'm not here to force anything. You seem like a smart girl. You know the city can be cruel. Sometimes we all need a little help getting where we want to be. Emily hesitated. He stepped closer but kept his distance. All I ask is dinner. Nothing more. No expectations. I want someone to talk to. My wife is no longer in the picture. That night, they dined in a private room of an upscale restaurant. Richard was kind, surprisingly gentle in conversation. He listened, laughed at her jokes, and never touched her without permission. After dessert, he walked her to the car. If you ever need anything, someone to talk to, or a place to stay, I'll give you my card, he said. No strings. She didn't take the card. Not yet. The next few days passed in silence. Ryan returned, surprised to see she hadn't left. You stayed, he said, pleased. I knew you had it in you. Emily said nothing. Instead, she began observing, studying, listening. The next week, Ryan brought another man to the apartment, this one younger, dressed in flashy clothes and cologne that clung to the walls. Emily played the part, smiling when expected, laughing on cue. She hated every second. That night, when the man left, she curled up on the edge of the bed. Her body burned with shame, but she didn't cry. She felt numb, as if each encounter was a performance, something outside of herself, something survivable. 2 weeks later, she made a decision. If this was going to be her reality for now, then she'd control it. She'd learn to move through it on her own terms. And one day, she would leave it behind. That's when Richard returned. Ryan greeted him like an old friend. But this time, Richard insisted on speaking to Emily alone. Ryan reluctantly stepped out. Richard sat beside her on the sofa. His eyes were tired, lined with age and regret. "I saw something in you that first night," he said softly. "You reminded me of someone I used to know. Someone before this life took me over." Emily looked away. "I'm not asking for anything, but if you ever want out, really out, I can help." "For real?" She finally turned toward him. "Why would you do that?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his coat and pulled out a small photograph. In it was a girl, no older than Emily, with similar eyes. "My daughter," he said. "She died 4 years ago. I didn't protect her when I should have. Maybe I just don't want to make the same mistake again." That night, Emily slept for the first time in days without nightmares. The next morning, she woke up and called a number Richard had scribbled on the back of the photo. "Hello?" A woman's voice answered. "I'm looking for a place to start over," Emily said. There was silence. Then a calm voice replied, "We help girls like you. Come by this afternoon. You're safe here." Emily glanced at the sleeping figure of Ryan in the next room. Then she stood, packed a small bag, and walked out. She never looked back. Emily stepped into the shelter's hallway just past noon. The modest 2-story building sat tucked behind an old church. From the outside, it looked like any other community center. Weathered bricks, a small sign reading Hope Haven, and flower beds struggling to bloom in the shade. But inside, it felt warmer than anywhere she'd been in months. The woman who greeted her was in her early 40s, dressed simply, with silver-streaked hair pulled into a tight bun. Her name was Karen Doyle, and her handshake was firm. "I'm not going to ask you to talk if you're not ready," Karen said. "Just know that we've helped women from all kinds of pasts. You're not alone." Emily gave a small nod, her lips still unable to form much more than a thank you. Karen led her upstairs to a small room with a single bed, clean linens, and a desk by the window. There was even a vase of fresh daisies on the sill. "You can stay as long as you need. We offer job training, counseling, and help with school placement. When you're ready, we'll talk about next steps." For the first time since leaving the farm, Emily felt something crack through the shell around her heart. Not joy, something smaller, a breath of relief. That night, she slept without fear. The following week, Emily joined a small computer skills class. There were 5 women, each one marked in different ways. A girl named Jenna had a cigarette burn on her neck she always hid with a scarf. Another, Carla, spoke only when spoken to, but they all carried the same silent history, and no one judged. Emily absorbed every lesson, every resource. She spent hours in the shelter's small library, reading about business, finance, law, anything that gave her a sense of control. One afternoon, while helping fold laundry, she opened up to Karen. "I wanted to go to college," she said. "I used to think maybe I'd become a teacher." Karen smiled. "Then do it. We can help you apply." Emily shook her head. "It's too late. I've been—" She trailed off, ashamed. "Used?" Karen asked gently. Emily nodded. Karen's gaze didn't falter. "You're not broken. You're not less. You're just beginning." Weeks turned into months. Emily got a part-time job at a cafe across from a college campus, serving lattes and washing dishes while memorizing faces and names. She earned enough to buy second-hand clothes, and eventually, her own phone. Karen helped her submit community college applications. Emily filled out financial aid forms at night, curled in bed with a penlight. One evening, as she walked home, a familiar voice called from behind. "Emily?" She froze. It was Ryan. He looked the same, too well dressed for the street, sunglasses pushed up in his hair. His smile was instant, as if nothing had happened. "I've been looking for you." She didn't answer. "You disappeared. You could have at least said goodbye." She started to walk faster. "Come on, Emily. Don't be like that. You were good at what you did. We had a good run." She turned to face him, fists clenched. "Don't ever speak to me again." He laughed. "Oh, you found your backbone? That's cute." She narrowed her eyes. "I'm not afraid of you anymore." "You should be," he said, stepping closer. "You think this place can protect you? You think you'll suddenly become someone else?" "I already have," she said firmly. "I don't belong to you. I never did." A woman from the shelter, Karen, had followed Emily out earlier and now approached from across the street. "Is there a problem here?" Karen asked calmly. Ryan paused, eyeing her. "Who are you? Her mommy?" "No, but I'm the person who will call the cops if you don't leave." He stared at them both for a moment, then scoffed. "She's not worth it," he muttered, turning on his heel and walking off. Karen waited until he disappeared around the corner before turning to Emily. "You all right?" Emily nodded slowly. "Yeah, I think I am." That night, she sat in bed and pulled out a blank notebook she had bought from the dollar store. On the first page, she wrote, "I'm not Emily Carter anymore." Below it, she added a new name, Emma Blake, a name of her choosing, a name no one gave her or forced on her, a name for the life she was building. By spring, Emma received an acceptance letter to the community college's business program. She cried quietly in the hallway when Karen handed her the envelope. "You earned this," Karen said proudly. Emma smiled through tears. "It's just the beginning." And it was. Classes were hard, but Emma kept up. She worked long shifts at the cafe, helped tutor other students in English composition, and joined a campus mentorship program. Her confidence grew daily. That's when she met Michael. He was in her economics class, clean-cut, friendly, with a voice that calmed her nerves. He held the door for her after class. He offered to study together. He never pushed. One Friday evening, after their fourth study session, he walked her home. "You're different," he said. Emma looked at him cautiously. "Different how?" "You're focused, like you've lived 100 lives already." She gave a soft laugh. "Feels that way sometimes." He looked at her seriously. "I like that about you." They stood in silence at her doorstep. He didn't try to kiss her. He didn't need to. "Good night, Emma," he said, and left. It was the first time in months that she smiled without pain behind it. But the past doesn't let go easily. One afternoon, as she poured a customer's coffee, a man stepped into the cafe, older, in a dark navy suit, with silver at his temples and a steady gaze. It was Richard Langford. He spotted her instantly. "Emily?" She froze. He walked up to the counter. "You look incredible." She stared at him. "It's Emma now." He nodded. "Emma, I've been searching for you." Her stomach turned. Why? He paused. Because I need to tell you something. She hesitated, then said quietly, I have a break in 10 minutes. He waited. When she sat down across from him in the booth, he placed a small photo album on the table. The same one she had seen in his coat pocket long ago. He opened it, flipped to the last page. A photograph. A young woman. Hair like hers. Eyes like hers. My daughter, he whispered, but not just my daughter. He lifted his gaze to meet hers. Your mother was her. Emma's heart slammed in her chest. What? Richard nodded slowly. Your mother, Diane. We were together briefly. She never told me she was pregnant. Emma stared at the photo. It was her mother. Younger, smiling. She shook her head, stunned. Are you saying you're my father? He exhaled. I didn't know until recently. When I saw you again, I had to be sure. I had a private test done. Emma backed away. You had my DNA tested without telling me. I needed to know, he said gently. I had to make things right. She stood, gripping the edge of the booth. You were going to sleep with me. And you were my father. I didn't know, he said, panicked. I swear to you, I had no idea. Tears welled in her eyes. Her knees nearly gave out. He reached for her. Emma, please, let me explain. But she was already running out the door, the spring air sharp against her skin, the world spinning beneath her feet. Emma didn't remember how she got back to the shelter. She barely registered the concrete beneath her shoes or the traffic lights blurring past. By the time she reached her room, her hands were shaking so violently she dropped her keys twice trying to open the door. Inside, she collapsed onto the floor. Her thoughts spiraled. He was my father, and he almost... God. She couldn't finish the thought. Emma buried her face in her hands. She rocked back and forth as the walls seemed to close in around her. Betrayal layered over betrayal. First Ryan, now this. The man who'd shown her tenderness. The one who offered escape. The one who listened. He was her father, and he had no idea. Until he did, and he still came back. A knock on the door broke her trance. Karen's voice followed. Emma, sweetheart, can I come in? Emma barely managed a whisper. Yeah. The door creaked open. Karen took one look at her and didn't ask a single question. She knelt, gathered Emma into her arms, and just held her. No advice, no lectures, just warmth. I didn't know, Emma said after several minutes. He didn't know either. But still. Karen nodded softly. You don't have to justify your pain. Sometimes even truth hurts like betrayal. Emma leaned against her shoulder. I don't know who I am anymore. You're exactly who you've chosen to become. Not who made you. Not what happened to you. That night, Emma wrote a letter. Not to Richard, but to herself. A letter forgiving the girl she'd been and naive, scared, desperate. A letter promising that she wouldn't be destroyed by someone else's guilt or silence. She folded it carefully and tucked it under her pillow. The following week, Emma didn't go to class. She didn't go to work. She stayed in the shelter, speaking only to Karen. Then one evening, Michael knocked at the door. He looked concerned but not judgmental. I was worried. Emma blinked, unsure of what to say. You don't have to explain, he said. But if you want to talk. She nodded slowly and stepped outside. They sat on the bench behind the building, under a flickering street lamp. I found out something, she said after a long pause. About someone I trusted. He waited. It changed everything. He reached out, gently taking her hand. Do you still trust me? I want to, she said truthfully. He gave a small smile. Then that's enough. Emma didn't cry. She didn't need to. For the first time in weeks, she felt safe beside someone who wanted nothing from her but honesty. A few days later, Richard sent her a letter. It wasn't fancy, just a handwritten note on simple stationery. Emma, I'm sorry. I didn't know. I swear to you, I won't try to contact you again unless you want me to. But if someday you want to ask questions or yell or cry, I will be there. No expectations. I've already spoken to my attorney. If you ever need help with school, housing, anything, you only need to ask. You're my daughter, and I love you. Even if I never deserved the right to say so. Richard Emma stared at the letter for a long time. She didn't respond, but she didn't throw it away either. By the time summer arrived, Emma was back at school. She passed her finals, kept her job, and even began helping new arrivals at the shelter. She became known as the one who'd been through it all. Women trusted her because she'd lived every kind of pain they carried. Michael stood by her side, never pressing, never demanding. One night, after walking her home from class, he paused on the steps of the shelter. I know this place is important to you, he said. It saved my life. I just want you to know. I'm here, whatever pace you need. Emma looked at him, then reached for his hand. Later that night, in her room, she stood quietly as he kissed her forehead. His hands were gentle, never roaming. When she kissed him back, it was slow and sure, not desperate, not afraid, just real. They lay down together, and she traced his chest with her fingertips, marveling at how still the world felt. When they finally touched, it was soft, tentative, full of care. No pressure, no guilt, only a connection that came from trust. For the first time in her life, Emma felt safe in someone's arms. The next morning, Michael made her coffee and sat with her in silence, smiling at nothing in particular. She realized then she was happy, not healed, but healing. Weeks later, Karen knocked on her door again. You have a visitor, she said. He says he's family. Emma's stomach turned. Richard? Karen nodded, but he brought someone with him. Emma stepped into the front hallway. There stood Richard, and beside him, a teenage boy in a wheelchair. My son, Richard said quietly. Ben. Ben looked up and offered a crooked grin. You're Emma, right? She nodded, unable to find her voice. I heard you're my sister, he said. Her eyes widened. You? No. Ben shrugged. Dad told me everything. I don't care. I'm just glad I'm not the only kid in the family anymore. Richard watched her carefully. We don't want anything from you. We just hoped maybe you'd meet him. Emma took a slow breath and stepped closer. Ben held out his hand. She took it. Over the next few weeks, Emma slowly built a relationship with Ben. He was funny, smart, and had a stubborn streak that reminded her of herself. He rolled into the cafe one afternoon and shouted, "My sister makes the best damn cappuccino in the state." Customers clapped. Emma blushed. Richard never pushed. He waited in the car when he brought Ben. He texted only when necessary. And eventually, Emma invited him in. They sat in silence at her small apartment table. "I'm not ready to forgive you," she said softly. "You don't have to," Richard replied. "But I do want to understand you." He looked up. "I want to know who you were to my mother. Why she never told you. Why you didn't look." He nodded slowly. "Then I'll tell you everything." And he did. One late evening, after another long talk with Richard, Emma sat with Michael at the cafe's back table. She sipped tea, eyes thoughtful. "Did you ever think," she said, "that a life can fall apart and come together at the same time?" Michael smiled. "I think you're living proof." She laughed. It was small, but it was free. She was no longer the girl by the river. She was Emma Blake, a student, a sister, a survivor, and she was far from finished. Summer melted into fall, and with it, Emma's world began to take on the shape of something she never thought she'd have again: stability. Her days were filled with classes, work, study sessions, occasional dinners with Ben and, more rarely, quiet conversations with Richard. Michael remained a steady presence, never pushing for more than she could give. He was patient in a way she'd never known a man to be, willing to build something from trust, brick by careful brick. But the past wasn't done with her yet. It returned one grey Thursday afternoon, when Emma opened the cafe door to begin her shift, and found a figure waiting in the corner. He wore a baseball cap pulled low, sunglasses, and a smirk she would recognize anywhere. Ryan. Her breath caught. She didn't move, didn't speak. He stood casually brushing imaginary lint off his shirt. "Long time no see, sweetheart." Emma gritted her teeth. "You need to leave." "Not until we talk." "There's nothing to talk about." "I disagree." He leaned in, lowering his voice. "You've done pretty well for yourself, haven't you? Pretty apartment, pretty job, pretty boyfriend." The rage flared instantly. "Get out," she hissed. He held up both hands. "Relax. I just came to offer a little proposal." She didn't respond, only stared, stone cold. Ryan smiled wider. "Let's just say I've got some pictures, videos. You remember our little setup, right? You think I didn't keep copies?" Emma's stomach dropped. "You've changed your name, sure. But that won't matter once a few files hit the right inboxes. Colleges, your job, that cute little do-gooder boyfriend. Should I send them one by one, all at once?" Her voice was barely audible. "You recorded me?" "Of course I did. Insurance, babe. Now, I'm willing to keep them to myself, for a price." Emma's mind raced. Her skin crawled, but her voice stayed firm. "What do you want?" He grinned. "Nothing complicated. A little help. You've got contacts now. I've got business to run. Girls to recruit. You talk to a few of your new shelter friends. Convince them they need a leg up. Introduce them to me. They'll trust you." She stepped back, as if from a poisonous snake. "You're disgusting." Ryan's eyes turned cold. Then maybe I'll just send those videos tonight. He moved toward the door. You have until Friday. He was gone before she could react. Emma barely made it through her shift. Her hands trembled so badly she spilled coffee twice. That night, she sat in her apartment in silence, staring at her phone. Her thoughts twisted like barbed wire. If he really had footage, her life could unravel in a day. Her college, her job, Michael, everything she had fought for could vanish. She didn't cry, she couldn't afford to. Instead, she called Karen. Within an hour, Karen was at her door, calm as always. Emma explained everything. Every word, every threat. When she finished, Karen's expression didn't change. We're going to the police, she said. Tomorrow morning. Emma hesitated. But what if he... Let him. He'll incriminate himself. And we have lawyers who work with the shelter. He messed with the wrong girl. Emma nodded slowly, the weight on her chest shifting slightly. The next day, they sat in a precinct office with a detective named Simmons, a woman with short red hair and eyes that missed nothing. Emma gave her statement. Karen confirmed everything she knew. They handed over Ryan's message history, old emails, and the note he left her before she fled his apartment. It wasn't everything, but it was enough. He's been on our radar, Simmons said. But he's slippery. Girls don't talk, they disappear. You're one of the first willing to step forward. Emma exhaled. What happens now? We'll handle it, Simmons said, but stay alert. If he contacts you again, don't engage. Just call us. That night, Emma returned home exhausted. Michael came over with takeout and no questions. They ate quietly, side by side. Afterward, as they washed dishes together, he looked at her with quiet concern. You okay? She met his eyes. No, but I will be. He smiled. That's good enough for me. Later, they curled together under a thin blanket. Emma kissed him, not out of fear or loneliness, but out of choice. Their touch was slow, unhurried. She let herself lean into the warmth of him, let his breath on her neck become something soothing rather than triggering. They moved together like a slow tide. Nothing forced, nothing rushed. Just skin and trust and quiet affection. And when she whispered his name against his collarbone, he held her tighter, like he knew exactly what it meant. 3 days later, Ryan was arrested. They caught him attempting to blackmail another girl, one from a different shelter across town. The charges included coercion, trafficking, and possession of illicit materials. Emma wasn't surprised when a detective called to inform her. She didn't ask for details. She didn't care. She was finally free, or so she thought. A week after Ryan's arrest, Richard called. His voice was grave. Emma, I received something. An envelope. No return address. Her blood chilled. What was in it? Photos of you from before. She closed her eyes. He must have mailed them before he got caught. Possibly. I wanted to ask, what do you want me to do with them? Burn them, she whispered. Please. I will. A pause. But Emma, I need to ask you something else. She waited. I've changed my will. What? I'm leaving part of my estate to you. College funds. Housing if you want it. And to Ben, of course. You're my children. Emma's voice cracked. You don't owe me anything. Maybe not, but I want to. She didn't argue. After a moment, he added, There's a scholarship I've started too, in your name. For girls like you, survivors. Emma blinked, heart pounding. I don't know what to say. Say you'll let something good come out of all this. She nodded, even though he couldn't see. Okay. At the end of the semester, Emma stood on stage in a borrowed gown, receiving her associate degree. Her hands trembled only slightly as she accepted the certificate. The crowd clapped. In the front row sat Karen, Ben, Michael, and Richard. No signs, no speeches, just pride. She smiled down at them, sunlight glinting off her cap. She was no longer Emily Carter, the forgotten girl by the river. She was Emma Blake, student, advocate, survivor, and she was ready for what came next. With her associate degree in hand, Emma took a deep breath and dared to dream bigger. Her next goal was a bachelor's degree in psychology. She wanted to help others, not just through stories or support, but professionally. If anyone knew how it felt to rebuild from nothing, it was her. She applied to several universities and was accepted by a mid-sized private college with a trauma recovery program. Thanks to the scholarship Richard had established, tuition was covered. She still worked at the cafe part-time, but her focus had shifted. Karen hugged her goodbye with tears in her eyes the day Emma packed her few belongings and moved into the student housing unit near campus. It was a small, sunlit room with a twin bed, a tiny desk, and a new beginning. Ben and Richard helped her carry boxes, while Michael stayed behind for the summer to work. I'll visit every weekend I can, he said, pressing a kiss to her forehead. Emma smiled. You are my favorite part of home. College life wasn't easy. Her classmates were younger, louder, and often more carefree. Emma sometimes felt like an outsider, older than her 21 years. But she quickly made a name for herself as the girl who never backed down from difficult topics in class, especially in courses that touched on abuse, recovery, and systemic inequality. One professor, Dr. Lila Monroe, took notice. You're not like the others, she said one day after class. Emma smiled shyly. I've had a different kind of education. Dr. Monroe invited her to join a campus research group focused on trauma-informed care. Emma accepted and found herself working with graduate students and therapists. They treated her with respect, listening intently to her perspective as both a survivor and a future counselor. Outside of class, Emma spent her nights writing. She started a blog under a pen name, Ashes and Rebuild, where she shared parts of her journey, changing names and details, but not truth. The blog gained traction. Other women began commenting, sharing their own stories, thanking her for her voice. And then one evening, she received a message from someone unexpected. Hi, I know this is strange. You don't know me, but I think you knew my sister. Her name was Jenna. Emma froze. Jenna had been one of the girls at the shelter. Quiet, reserved, with the scarf always around her neck. She'd left one morning and never came back. No note, no goodbye. The message continued. She passed away 2 months ago. I found your blog bookmarked on her phone. She read every post. It helped her feel strong. I just wanted to say thank you. You made her feel seen. Emma stared at the message, tears pooling in her eyes. She replied, She was strong, stronger than most. I'm honored she found comfort in my words. I'll never forget her. She dedicated her next post to Jenna. In her second semester, Emma applied for a summer internship with a non-profit that offered legal advocacy for victims of abuse and trafficking. She was accepted and spent long hours shadowing lawyers, sitting in on support group meetings, and helping women complete paperwork for restraining orders or housing applications. Some cases hit close to home. One woman, Maya, reminded her painfully of herself. Young, confused, trapped in an emotional tug-of-war with her abuser. Emma sat beside Maya during her first court appearance, holding her hand as she trembled. "You're not alone," Emma whispered. Maya's fingers clutched hers tighter. "How do you know it gets better?" Emma's voice didn't waver. "Because I'm standing here with you." That night, after the court ruled in Maya's favor, Emma sat on the steps outside the courthouse and watched the sun set. She felt heavy and light at once, like she had finally started turning her pain into purpose. Michael visited every weekend, just as he promised. On one of those visits, he surprised her with a weekend trip to the coast. It was her first time seeing the ocean. They walked barefoot on the sand as the waves lapped around their ankles. Emma laughed as the wind tangled her hair, and Michael snapped pictures of her mid-spin. That night, as they sat near a beachside fire pit, watching sparks rise into the night sky, Michael turned to her. "I want to ask you something," he said. She tilted her head. "Okay." He took a slow breath. "I know we've been through a lot. I know you've been through more than I can imagine. But I want to build something with you. A future. Maybe not now, but someday." Emma looked into his eyes, full of fear and love all at once. "You mean marriage?" He nodded. "Eventually, yeah. I'm not going anywhere." She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached for his hand and rested it over her heart. "I'm not ready yet," she said honestly. "But I think someday I will be." That's all I needed to hear. Later, in the quiet of their rented cabin, Emma curled up beside him, her head resting on his chest. She kissed the soft skin of his shoulder, and he ran his fingers through her hair. Their movements were slow and natural, every touch speaking of trust more than desire. When they made love, it wasn't passionate or wild. It was gentle, warm, and deeply connected. She traced the lines of his face in the dark and whispered, "Thank you." And he replied, "For what?" She smiled. "For not saving me. For walking beside me while I saved myself." The fall semester brought new challenges. Emma took on a mentorship role at the shelter she'd once lived in, visiting twice a month to meet with girls who reminded her of who she used to be. One, a fierce 18-year-old named Lila, resisted everyone's help, except Emma's. "You're the only one who doesn't treat me like glass," Lila said. "The others talk to me like I'm broken," Emma smiled. "That's because I know what it feels like to be shattered and still standing." Under Emma's mentorship, Lila enrolled in GED classes and stopped running away. Karen called Emma one night, her voice cracking with emotion. "You're changing lives just by showing up." Emma looked out her dorm window at the lit campus, her textbooks open. Her life spread across a desk she never thought she'd sit at. "I'm just repaying what was given to me," she said softly. As her second year ended, Emma received an invitation to speak at a trauma awareness conference. Her blog had grown. Her story had begun circulating through non-profit networks, and someone had recommended her. She stared at the invitation for days, unsure if she was ready. When she finally told Michael, he grinned. "You were born ready," she smiled. "I was born broken." He kissed her forehead and rebuilt stronger than most. Emma stood behind the thick velvet curtain at the trauma recovery conference, her palms sweating against the note cards she had rewritten a dozen times. The room beyond the stage buzzed softly with quiet conversations. Over 100 attendees filled the seats. Therapists, students, social workers, survivors. Her name had been printed in bold on the schedule. Emma Blake. Ashes and Rebuild. A survivor's path to healing. Michael sat in the front row, beside DeMonroe and Karen, who had flown in just for the speech. Ben and Richard couldn't make it, but they'd sent her messages of encouragement. Emma clutched those words in her heart now. She exhaled slowly as the announcer called her name. The spotlight hit her like a wave of heat. She stepped into it, straightened her shoulders, and faced the crowd. "I was born in a small town," she began, her voice shaking slightly. "And like too many girls, I was taught to be quiet, to endure, to forgive, but I was never taught how to fight back, or even that I had the right to." She paused, scanning the audience. "I trusted someone who promised me a better life. Instead, I was used, discarded, and told to be grateful. I lost myself. But I found my voice." Her voice grew steadier as she continued. She didn't tell every detail, but she told enough. Enough for other survivors in the audience to nod silently, for professionals to lean in. She ended with a message not of pity, but of power. "I'm not defined by what was done to me. I'm defined by what I did next. And what I'm doing now. Healing isn't linear. It's messy. It's painful. But it's possible. I'm living proof." When she finished, the room was silent for a long moment. Then came the applause. Not polite, not obligatory, real, thunderous. Afterward, people lined up to speak with her. Some just offered quiet thanks. Others clutched her hands, eyes brimming with tears. A young woman, no older than 20, stepped forward last. "You saved my life," she said. "I read your blog in a hospital room. I was going to end it all, but your words, they kept me here." Emma's throat tightened. She pulled the girl into a hug and whispered, "You saved yourself. I just reminded you that you could." Emma returned to campus changed, not because she had stood on a stage, but because she had seen herself reflected in so many others. Her pain wasn't isolated. Her healing wasn't just her own. That semester, she started a student group, Rebuild. It was a safe space for survivors, allies, and advocates. They held workshops, discussions, and resource drives for local shelters. Membership grew weekly. Emma also accepted an offer to co-write a paper with Dr. Monroe on trauma-informed advocacy in higher education. The journal that published it called it raw, insightful, and necessary. Despite all this, Emma never stopped mentoring. She still met with Lila every Saturday. One afternoon, after they'd finished homework together, Lila turned to her. "I've been thinking about college." Emma smiled. "You'd be great." "I don't have your story. I wasn't trafficked or anything." "Pain doesn't need a ranking," Emma replied. Your story matters because it's yours. Lila nodded slowly. Maybe I'll start with night classes. Emma hugged her. That's already brave. Emma's relationship with Richard continued quietly. They spoke every Sunday by phone. He never pushed, never tried to replace the father she never had. But he was present, and over time, she let her guard down. Ben adored her. I'm glad I have you, he said one afternoon while playing chess over video chat. Dad's always so serious. You make him human. Emma laughed. I'll take that as a compliment. Ben grinned. Good, because it was. One evening, Michael invited her to a small restaurant off campus. The lights were dim, the booths cozy, and a single candle flickered between them. They'd been together for over 2 years now. Their love was deep and quiet. Not showy, but undeniable. Halfway through dessert, Michael reached into his pocket. Emma blinked. What are you? He placed a small velvet box between them. Don't panic. I'm not proposing. She let out a laugh of relief. Yet, he added. She froze again. Michael opened the box. Inside was a delicate silver ring with a tiny engraved phoenix. For now, he said, this is a promise that I'll be here. When you're ready, we'll take the next step. No pressure. Just us. Tears filled her eyes as she slipped the ring onto her finger. I'm not ready for marriage, she whispered, but I'm ready for forever. That night, they celebrated in the quietest, most intimate way. Emma traced his chest with her fingers, the silver ring glinting in the lamplight. He kissed her shoulder, her jawline, her fingertips. They made love slowly, reverently, as if every movement was a vow. She felt safe, whole, and deeply cherished. And when they lay together afterward, their fingers intertwined, Emma knew this wasn't a chapter. This was a home. But peace never lasts forever. The following month, Emma received an email from an anonymous sender. No message, just one attachment. A photo. Her. From the past. Not explicit, but unmistakable. Her eyes haunted, her shoulders bare. A shadow of the girl she used to be. She stared at the screen in horror. Another message followed an hour later. Still rebuilding? Her hands shook as she called Karen, forwarding the messages. This isn't over, Emma said, her voice hollow. Karen responded immediately. We'll contact cybercrimes. You're not alone in this. Michael was furious. How are these still floating around? Didn't the police get everything? Apparently not, Emma whispered. Richard, when she told him, moved quickly. I'll hire a private firm, he said. We'll find out who's doing this. Emma nodded. But the fear had already crept back in. She began watching over her shoulder again, locking doors twice, avoiding unknown numbers. It was like a shadow had returned to her life, darker and more slippery than before. And yet, she didn't break. She'd been through worse. But this time she wasn't a girl running alone. This time she had people beside her. This time she had a voice, and she was ready to fight. The digital world was vast and merciless. After the anonymous emails, Emma's peace fractured again. Days became a blur of checking messages, changing passwords, filing reports with detectives, and fielding calls from Richard's legal team. It didn't take long for the private investigators to trace the source of the email. It wasn't Ryan. He was still in custody awaiting trial. It was someone else. Another man from her past. His name was Curtis Hale. A tech-savvy recruiter Ryan once used to screen girls before he met them. Emma barely remembered him, only that he'd appeared at the apartment once, asked questions she didn't understand, and disappeared soon after. Apparently, Curtis had kept more than a few files. And now, he was threatening to release them online. Richard's team moved quickly. They froze Curtis's known accounts, blocked activity from his usual email addresses, and prepared for a restraining order. But the man was slippery, working from VPNs, fake identities, and a network of dark web forums. Emma sat across from Karen in a dim-lit office, her hands clutched tightly in her lap. "He wants attention," Karen said firmly. "Control. He doesn't care about money. He wants to remind you that he still owns a piece of your past." Emma's voice was thin. "What if he does post them?" Karen didn't flinch. "Then we fight. In public, if we have to, but not in shame. Never again in shame." Emma exhaled deeply. "Then I'm ready." That week, she recorded a video. She didn't name names, she didn't show details, but she stared directly into the camera and said, "I was exploited. I was recorded without consent. And now, someone is trying to use that to silence me. But I won't be silent. I will not be shamed for surviving." The video went viral within 24 hours. Advocacy groups, students, and even public figures began sharing it, praising her courage. Within a week, she was interviewed by a major podcast, invited to speak on a national morning show, and contacted by a publisher asking if she'd consider a memoir. Curtis sent no further messages, but that didn't stop Emma from moving forward. Through Richard's legal connections, she helped draft a bill proposal for the state legislature, focused on increasing penalties for digital exploitation, especially involving trafficking survivors. She worked alongside lawyers and survivors, attending hearings, giving testimony, and appearing on local news. During one of the hearings, she looked out over the crowd of suits and lawmakers and spotted someone in the back row. Lila, dressed in business attire, hair braided back neatly. Emma smiled from the podium. Afterward, they hugged in the hallway. "I saw your video," Lila said. "It made me realize I'm not afraid anymore." Emma beamed. "You never had to be." Meanwhile, her relationship with Michael deepened. They moved in together at the start of the new year. A modest apartment with books stacked in corners and coffee always brewing. Michael's work as a youth counselor kept him busy, but every night he made time to cook dinner and ask about her day. Their love was a quiet rhythm, built on patience and healing. One evening, as they folded laundry together, Emma paused. "There's something I want to do," she said. Michael looked up. "What is it?" "I want to go back." He blinked. "Back where?" "To where it all started. The town I came from." Michael didn't question her, he just nodded. "Then we'll go." A month later, they drove out of the city and into the open hills of her childhood. The road curved past empty fields and rusted fences. Emma stared out the window, her thoughts tumbling like dry leaves. They reached the small house she once called home, long since abandoned, the paint chipped, the porch steps sagging. She stepped out of the car and walked up to the gate. Everything was smaller than she remembered. The old willow tree was still there, its limbs drooping like a tired giant. She stood beneath it for a long time, letting the silence settle around her. Michael joined her. "Want to go in?" She nodded. They stepped inside the crumbling house. Dust motes swirled in the light. Her mother's old rocker still sat by the fireplace, and a faded photo clung to the wall by a crooked nail. Her at 6 years old, holding a ragged teddy bear. Emma touched the frame gently. "I hated this place," she whispered, "but I also loved it." She turned to Michael. "I think I'm ready to let it go." They drove away just before dusk, the house shrinking in the rearview mirror. Emma didn't cry, she just breathed. That night, in their hotel room, Emma undressed slowly in front of the mirror. She touched the silver phoenix ring on her finger, then turned to Michael. Their eyes met. No words, just invitation. He stepped to her, brushing her hair aside, pressing a kiss to the back of her neck. They moved together like old dancers, every gesture understood, every breath aligned. There was no pain in this touch, no fear, only peace, only belonging. When they lay together afterward, tangled in warm sheets, Emma rested her head on his chest and whispered, "I feel free." And Michael, his voice hushed in the dark, replied, "You are." 2 weeks later, Emma received an email from the publisher who had contacted her earlier. They wanted her memoir. She wasn't sure at first. Exposing her story in such detail terrified her. But Karen, as always, offered clarity. "This isn't about reliving trauma," she said. "It's about reclaiming it." Emma sat at her desk, staring at a blank document. And then she typed, "I used to think survival was the end of the story. But survival is only the beginning. My name is Emma Blake. And this is how I rose from ash." Emma's fingers hovered over the keyboard in her modest home office. Sunlight stretching across the hardwood floor. The scent of Michael's coffee drifted from the kitchen. Her laptop screen displayed a growing manuscript, 80,000 words and counting. The working title, "Ashes and Rebuild." The story of Emma Blake. The memoir had started as a whisper, a private letter to her younger self. But now it pulsed with power. She detailed everything, her dreams, her fears, the betrayal, the survival, not with bitterness, but with precision and courage. Each chapter was a door unlocked, a wound cleaned. Michael read her draft silently each night, page by page. He didn't offer praise or critique. He offered presence. "You don't need to make this perfect," he told her once. "It already is. Because it's true." Emma smiled. "I want to honor every girl who didn't get to finish her story." By summer, the manuscript was complete. Her publisher fast-tracked its release, citing the viral success of her public speeches and blog. They arranged a small book tour across several cities, panels, readings, workshops. Emma's face appeared on posters beside phrases like, "A voice for the voiceless," and "The fire didn't consume her, it forged her." But fame was a strange thing. Emma walked into bookstores and saw her name on glossy covers. She also saw whispers on forums. "She's capitalizing on her trauma. Attention seeker. Another fake survivor." One morning, she sat at the breakfast table, scrolling through hate comments, her jaw clenched. Michael took her phone gently. "Don't let strangers define your truth." She nodded, but the ache lingered. That evening, She visited the shelter, the one where she had once clung to sanity. Karen met her at the door, older now, but as sharp as ever. "You've done well," she said, "but the bigger your light, the more shadows you cast." Emma smiled faintly. "What if I'm tired of being brave?" Karen touched her shoulder. "Then rest, and when you're ready, be brave again." One stop on her tour brought her to Washington, D.C., where she was invited to speak before a federal task force on digital trafficking and victim protection. The room was cold and formal, full of people in suits and lanyards. Emma stood at the podium and told her story again, this time with policy in mind. She offered suggestions for reform, outlined gaps in survivor resources, and shared insights into how predators manipulate shame. When she finished, the room erupted in quiet, steady applause. A senator approached her afterward. "You're going to change the law," he said. "You've already changed lives." The book launch was held in New York City. The venue was modest but full. Fellow survivors, advocates, supporters, even professors and students she hadn't seen in years. As she signed copies, a woman stepped up quietly. She looked to be in her late 50s, wearing a simple blue blouse and holding a single flower. Emma's heart stilled. "Mom?" The woman smiled hesitantly. "Hi, sweetheart." Diane Carter looked older, her once chestnut hair streaked with grey. Her eyes, though, were still unmistakably Emma's. "I got sober," Diane said. 3 years now. I've been following your journey. Every word, every photo." Emma didn't know what to say. "I don't expect forgiveness," Diane continued, "but I had to come. Just to say, I see you, and I'm sorry I didn't protect you." Tears blurred Emma's vision. She didn't speak. She simply stepped around the table and pulled her mother into a long, silent hug. That night, in the hotel room, she sat with Michael by the window, staring down at the city lights. "She came," Emma whispered. Michael squeezed her hand. "I know. I don't know if I can ever trust her again." "You don't have to. You just have to decide what's good for you." Emma rested her head on his shoulder. "You always make it sound simple." "That's because love is simple," he said. "We just forget sometimes." Weeks later, Emma returned to campus to give a talk at her alma mater. She stood in the same lecture hall where she once sat shaking, afraid someone might recognize her past. Now she stood tall, confident, her ring flashing in the light as she gripped the podium. "I want to talk about reclamation," she said to the crowd of young students. "Not just surviving trauma, but owning it. Making art from it. Making justice from it. Making life from it." Afterward, she was approached by a student who couldn't have been older than 19. "I haven't told anyone," the girl said, "but I think I've been through something like you." Emma touched her arm gently. "Then let this be the first time you were believed." That night, back at home, Emma and Michael lay on their couch, tangled in each other's arms. He kissed her collarbone, her wrist, the tips of her fingers. She responded with soft sighs, leaning into his touch. They moved together slowly, reverently. No hunger, no fire, just warmth. When they finally settled, breathless and wrapped in one another, she whispered, "This feels like coming home." And Michael smiled in the dark, saying, "That's because it is." Months passed. The bill Emma helped inspire was signed into law in her state. She was featured on the cover of a major magazine with the headline, "The Woman Who Refused to Be Silent." And on a rainy October evening, she returned to the bookstore for a second printing celebration. As she signed copies, a mason approached with a cane and a warm smile. "Emma?" he asked. "Yes?" "I'm Judge Raymond Walker. I presided over Ryan's sentencing. I just wanted you to know. We listened, and justice was served." Emma thanked him, and for the first time, she felt a final door in her heart close. Later that night, she sat at her desk, updating her blog. The newest post was titled, "Not an Ending." She wrote, "Healing doesn't have an endpoint. It bends and stretches, repeats and recedes. But it's real. It's possible. And most of all, it's yours to define. I'm not done, but I'm no longer afraid. I don't just have a future. I am one." Winter settled over the city in quiet layers of frost. Emma stood at the window of her apartment, watching soft snow drift past the glass. Inside, the room was warm and golden with lamplight. On the table beside her rested a printed invitation. National Advocacy Conference. Keynote speaker, Emma Blake. She touched the card lightly, almost in disbelief. 3 years ago, she was running from shame and silence. Now she was being asked to lead others out of their own. She heard the door open and the familiar sound of Michael's boots thudding against the floor. "Hey," he called. "You ready?" Emma turned. He held 2 tickets in his hand and a nervous smile. She raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" He handed them to her. "Hawaii. 2 weeks. Just us. I already cleared it with your publisher." Emma laughed. "Are you trying to kidnap me?" "Nope," he said, pulling her into a hug. "I'm trying to give you something you've never had. A break." She melted into him. "That sounds perfect." They flew out 2 days later. The resort was quiet and tucked between palm trees and pale sand. The ocean sparkled with sunlight, and Emma swam in it every morning, letting the salt water carry away what was left of her old ghosts. One night, they dined by torchlight under the stars. Michael reached into his pocket and pulled out the same velvet box he'd offered once before. This time, he opened it without preamble. "I know you said someday," he said, "but if today is someday, I'd like to ask you again." Inside the box was a simple gold ring with a tiny blue sapphire. Her birthstone. Emma didn't cry, she didn't hesitate. She took his hand. Today is someday. They married in spring. It was small, just 20 guests in a garden full of tulips. Karen walked Emma down the aisle. Ben gave the toast. Richard stood quietly in the back row, hands clasped, tears in his eyes. Emma wore no veil. She wanted to be seen. Michael's vows were simple. "I don't promise to fix you. I promise to love every version of you, always." Emma's vows were braver. "I used to think I was broken, but you taught me I was growing. You are not my savior. You are my partner." When they kissed, the crowd erupted in quiet cheers. Later, they danced barefoot in the grass, the moon watching overhead. They honeymooned in the mountains, wood cabins, hot cocoa, endless trees. Emma read novels by the fireplace and scribbled notes for her second book, Becoming Fire, The New Faces of Recovery. Michael took photographs, dozens of them. Her laughing in the snow, gazing at the stars, asleep in a hammock with a paperback on her chest. They didn't rush home. For once, the world could wait. One night, in their cabin, they lay tangled in warm blankets. Emma traced her fingers over the ridges of Michael's sign. He kissed the inside of her wrist, her collarbone, the small scar above her hip. Their lovemaking was slow, worshipful, a communion of memory and hope. She whispered to him with every breath, not just words, but meaning. That she had chosen this, chosen him, chosen life. He responded with a kiss that felt like a vow. When she reached for him, it was not out of fear or need, but because she was whole, and she wanted to share that wholeness. Back home, life moved forward. Emma's second book hit shelves 6 months later and quickly climbed bestseller lists. She began teaching part-time at the university where she once studied, designing a course called Narrative Justice, healing through storytelling. Her students adored her. She still blogged, still mentored, still visited shelters, though now it was to speak, to uplift, to remind young women what survival looked like 5 or 10 years down the road. One afternoon, she received a message from Lila. Got accepted into grad school, starting a degree in social work. You inspired this. Emma smiled and sent back a single line. Proud doesn't even begin to cover it. Years passed. Emma's work reached global stages. She traveled to Geneva, to Cape Town, to Buenos Aires. She helped shape policy, trained educators, built networks of survivor-led advocacy. But at home, she remained grounded. Saturday mornings were for farmers' markets and puzzles. Sunday evenings for slow dancing in the kitchen. Michael cooked. She wrote. They grew together, steady as roots. And then came the morning she stood in front of a mirror, holding a pregnancy test. 2 lines. She stared, stunned. When she told Michael, he knelt, laughing and crying at once. You're going to be an amazing mum. Fear stirred in her. What if she couldn't protect this child? What if she passed down the pain? Michael saw the flicker in her eyes. You're not who you were, he said. You're everything you've become. 9 months later, they welcomed a daughter. They named her Hope. Emma held her close, skin to skin, breathing in her tiny heartbeat. Everything I lost, she whispered, brought me to you. That night, in the hospital room, Michael kissed Emma's forehead as she held their sleeping newborn. Her body ached, her mind blurred from exhaustion, but her soul was quiet. We did it, she whispered. Michael smiled. No, you did it. The final chapter of her memoir, released a year later, was short. Just a page. It read, I was not saved by love. I was not rescued by justice. I was not repaired by time. I rose from ashes, from silence, from the darkness others tried to trap me in. I built a life so bright that even my scars cast light. And if you're reading this, you can too.